Hello, everybody, and thanks for joining in to another live session with us at Dream Data. Today, we're gonna focus on something that I actually don't know that much about, which is analyst relations and these analysts that recommend vendors of software all over the world in all sorts of categories. What is it? Is it worth the money? What does it entail? How much work is there to do? And yeah, is it actually something you should be considering in your business or not? But as I said, I don't know too much about this topic. But luckily, I have you here today, Wendy, that I actually do know, perhaps more than anybody else in the
No,
world.
that's not true. I know a lot, but there's definitely people who've been doing analyst relations a lot more. And as I always say, you can always learn from somebody, even someone who's just been doing analyst relations for a year or two. They often have some really great ideas because they're not tainted by doing it for 20 years. So, everybody has some really good best practices, and I don't think there's one person who's the best at analyst
Yeah,
relations. So if
but
you
at
want to say
least,
it's me,
yeah.
I'll take it.
Looking at your CV, I was quite mind blown by the depth of your experience. But maybe before we just jump straight into it, maybe you can do like the 1-2 minute background of why do you know something about this topic and what it is that like you do today on a day-to-day basis.
Sure. Well, day to day, it's hard, but so hi, I'm Wendy Shlensky. I live in New York City. I'm an analyst relations expert, or like I like to say, a maven. A maven is someone who explains complex topics into the lay language. So whoever I'm working with, I try to explain what analyst relations is in words and language that makes sense to them. And I've been doing it for 20 years. I love it. I think that'll come out in both my personality and my voice and anyone who's watching the video. I love it a little too much sometimes, I think, but that's okay. It served me well. I never thought I'd do it for this long, but here I am. And I started working with an analyst firm that is no longer here. Actually, it was called Giga Information Group, and they got bought by Forrester Research, one of the top two in my book, analyst firms in the world. And I at Giga and Forrester, I had two big vendor clients, like software services firms, one of which had a whole team of analyst relations professionals that I worked with, like 5 or 6 people.
Yeah.
And one I engaged with the VP of marketing. And so basically, I convinced the VP of marketing to hire me as their first analyst relations professional. And that was Cognizant Technology Solutions, Cognizant. So when I joined back in 2004, it was it was about $500 million in revenue. I was with them when they crossed the $1 billion revenue line, and it was amazing. And now they're a $16 billion company.
Shit.
So, I'm not saying analyst relations was responsible for all of that, but it was definitely responsible for a little bit of it.
Yeah.
So that's, and then I worked at Cognizant. I moved to Infosys, which is also an Indian outsourcing company. And then among other things, there are many, many things. And then moved to HGS. And about 2 years ago, I started my own analyst relations advisory consulting company. And since then, I've transitioned from only knowing services, which I've heard my whole life is much harder to work with than software, because software, you can just plug it in and it either does what you say it does or it doesn't.
Yeah.
Whereas services, you're just talking about people. And in the last couple of years, I've worked with a lot of hot technology topics. So like security vendors, digital experience vendors, data analytics vendors, all kinds of different kinds of companies.
Yeah.
So I've got a much broader range than I did 2 years ago.
Who knows? We might come hiring you at some point as well.
I love it.
But so I said, I don't know too much about the topic, but I quite often browse software vendor websites, and every now and then you'll see, hey, we did this Forrester thing or in the Gartner's Magic Quadrant, and I started getting curious in why is it that you do this? What is the how do you extract value out of these things? And is it something that we should be considering at Dream Data with just 40 employees, or what is it? But before getting into the specifics, maybe you can kind of lay out like a simple definition of what is analyst relations and what is the work that you do there.
Okay, sure. So analyst relations at its best is a bi-directional feedback loop between a vendor, a technology vendor such as Dream Data, or a security software vendor, outsourcing vendor, you name the technology topic, AI vendor, and an analyst, an industry analyst who covers a specific technology market. So they're like Gartner research, I think, has something like 9,000 employees across the globe. And, they're not all analysts, but I'd say they probably have a good like 900 analysts across the world covering different topics. And here's a key point to note is that, and this was even before the pandemic, when we all went virtual, analysts typically often will work virtually. And for example, like when I was at HGS, one of my key analysts lived in New Zealand, and my team would be like, "Why are we talking to that guy? We don't have business in New Zealand. We cover the U.S. market." I'm like, "He just happens to live in New Zealand, but he covers our market. Don't you worry." So don't think about it as like, "Oh, that guy lives or that gal lives someplace, and we don't want to do business there, so we don't want to talk to him or her." Don't think about it that way. It's about what topic do they cover and how influential are they in that market?
Yeah.
And when people like to say like, well, should I do analyst relations? I say, talk to your prospects and your clients. Are they talking to industry analysts? And it's not just like when they find you, but throughout the life cycle. So, when they're researching like different parts, analysts work along the whole software technology buying cycle. So whether that's like, what vendor do I need for, security software, or once you have a long list, how do I figure out which are the vendors that meet my needs? How do I figure out what my criteria should be to even pick a vendor? So analysts can help with that, creating the shortlist, creating the RFI, creating the criteria that you want.
Yeah, so on the one hand, they're monitoring the market and understanding the technology, and the other hand is that they're kind of a shortcut for making good decisions about which vendors you go with then.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. They can, because someone, I like to say, like, so the Gartner Magic Quadrant, I think, is like the Emmys or the Oscars of the analyst relations world. Like, you're in the leader quadrant, sales is giving you high fives, maybe they're sending you champagne, people are really, really happy.
Yeah.
But I like to say a buyer who is buying any kind of software or services, if they're buying it just because you're in the leaders quadrant, that is not a buyer you want. Because in my opinion, that's a buyer who's not making a really informed decision.
Yeah.
You want a buyer that looks at the Magic Quadrant or the Forrester Wave. That's another version of these rating reports, comparison reports, and talks to the analyst and says, this is what's important to me. Which vendor do you think is going to be more effective for me? And sometimes, like, to be a leader in the Magic Quadrant, you often have to have a lot of revenue. You typically have to be global. So like in 3 different regions. So like, Asia Pac, Europe, and US. Well, what if you're a buyer in the US and you really only care about, my clients are only in the US, I'm not expanding to Europe. Do I really need a software that's going to help me in Europe? Probably not. So you're paying more money because you're buying the leader who works in that area. I'm not saying that, each situation is very different. So
can we just repeat the Magic Quadrant criteria? Just that's interesting to know. Or
I
like
mean,
as you
each Magic
are they like
Quadrant is
defined
different.
things, or is it people? Is it like a secret, or do people know of what it takes to get into it?
Both. So each
Okay.
of the Magic Quadrants, and if you're curious about a Magic Quadrant, like what is a Magic Quadrant, or like is there a Magic Quadrant in my space? You can
Yeah.
often Google like Magic Quadrant for like whatever the topic is, and
Okay.
one of the leaders, typically has bought what's called reprint rights, which is
Okay.
the right to post the the report on their website and to
Yeah.
market it out. If you
Okay.
don't buy the reprint rights, you cannot put it on your website. I mean,
Mm.
I guess you could, but you're going to get a lawsuit, so don't do that.
Yeah.
Um, um, but you can get, and in the Magic Quadrant, they typically evaluate anywhere from 10 to 20 vendors, and
Yeah.
they'll have little, like each one will have strengths and cautions
Yeah.
and a little paragraph introducing them. They'll talk about the market, and they'll talk about the criteria they needed to evaluate those vendors. So often there's a
Yeah.
revenue criteria. So like, and it depends on the market. Um, and it depends on the year. So like they'll
Mm.
typically do, a Magic Quadrant, several years in a row, and each year
Yeah.
the revenue criteria might go up
Yeah. Yeah.
because the market's getting bigger.
Yeah. It was a new category, and now those firms have grown, and yeah. So it sounds like it's not the first move you make if you create a new company. That it's not at that point you start engaging into analyst relations. Can you say something about when are you kind of mature enough to take dip your toes in this?
Sure. Well, I think there's really two main reasons to work with analysts. There's the what we call the earn side, building your brand, getting your brand out there, getting more people aware of you so that you're earning more money. And then
Yeah.
there's the learn side where you're working with analysts to help you learn more about the market, learn more
Yeah.
about what your buyers are looking for so that you can create marketing that speaks to your buyers in your buyer language. And a lot of the
Yeah.
analysts
So
will
if
also,
I'm to translate that, that is kind of, is there any new topic that people are starting to be concerned about that you should be putting into your marketing material or making product features that addresses or like something like that?
yes, absolutely. They can help you with your product roadmap. So they can
Yeah.
look at the product roadmap and say, you know what, this is all like low hanging fruit, catch up.
Yeah.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
got to get there. Or they can say, you know what, our clients have been asking us for XYZ, and it would be really great if you could create something that relates to that.
Yeah. Makes sense. Mm, maybe you can share a few. I think, did you call it
Earn.
earn
Oh, earn
examples of?
stories.
You
So,
don't have
so
to. You don't have to name the companies, but just maybe some examples of what could happen as outcomes.
Sure. So, and part of it is you're building a relationship. So this
Yeah.
is one place, a lot of people are thinking like, uh-oh, Chat GPT is gonna take my job. I think
Yeah.
analyst relations, because it's such a people focused job, ideally is going to be safe from the bots. Ideally, bots
Yeah.
are going to help us be even more effective and
Yeah.
efficient. And a couple of years ago, analyst relations was one of the most like requested jobs. It was like the 10th most um, sought after job according to LinkedIn. So it's definitely a field that's growing.
Yeah.
Um, but in terms of ROI and what you can get from the earn side, so
Yeah.
ideally you're engaging your sales team and your marketing team to find out how the leads are coming into your website and how people are hearing about you and asking
Mm.
like, oh, is an analyst involved in your deal? And then taking that information and putting it in your CRM and seeing it over time, like, oh yeah, we're getting a lot of queries because Gartner, people are saying that they talked to
Yeah.
Gartner and, or they
Yeah.
saw me in a Gartner report or something like that. And
Yeah.
it's not just the reports, it's the analysts write, they write a lot of reports, but they talk to tons of people. and you want them to say the right things when they're talking to those people, and as opposed to the wrong things. Like, for example, like think about your target market or your ideal customer profile. If you're really focused on, B2B over $1 billion, then, you want those kinds of prospects. You don't want prospects that only have like 200 million in revenue. So like being really clear on what your ideal customer profile is and sharing that with the analysts. And even that exercise sometimes can be really useful.
Yeah. Yeah. It makes come. Are you still there, Wendy?
Oh yeah, it says.
No, you just cut out.
Sorry,
just
my connection is. Sorry, I just got a message. The internet,
No
in
worries.
New York City, it's just as bad as it is other places.
No, so it's,
anyway,
but when you mention
about
these
ROI, like, so
yeah.
you get in reports, you talk to analysts, you get in reports, analysts talk about you. Ideally, that's translating to sales somehow or prospecting, that they're talking about you more. And they can also, like, you can also do custom studies with them. So Forrester, for example, has a product called the TEI, the Total Economic Impact. And
I've
you
come
can use
across
it
that
for any kinds of things.
some places. Yeah.
Yeah, they're really good at marketing it right now. So like, again, Google TEI and things will come up. But one of my friends who does analyst relations at their company, they did one. They interviewed 4 of their clients, and they came back with a 582% ROI for customers that use their software. That's amazing. So if you're trying to cut through the noise of why me, and your customers are super happy with you, and you know what the ROI is from using you, I think it's better to have Forrester, who's like a independent third party, say you've got a 500% ROI than Mr. or Miss Salesperson saying like, oh, our clients are really happy with us. It's like, I think independent third parties carry a lot more weight than salespeople, and I think that's really where the rubber meets the road.
I think I've read 2 of these TEI
CEI.
reports for 2 different vendors, and I think the magic is that it's not just a number that they invent. You can read it, and then you can understand the rationale of why have they arrived at 500% ROI. It's not just something
it's a
that
really long process. So
exactly.
back when I worked at, it was actually a tool that was invented by someone at Giga. And back when I was at, I don't know if it was Giga or Forrester, but one of those companies, I actually sold one to a non-vendor who was using it to figure out whether they should go with SAP or not. So they were trying to figure out what's the total economic impact of choosing SAP. So you can use it for all kinds of different things. You don't just have to use it as a technology vendor play.
Yeah, and I think the whole software market have to come up with a bit better business cases than what they had to do 1 or 2 years back. And I can definitely see this being what you're going to call a supporting tool for helping clients understand the value of like the economic value of like signing a contract with you.
Yeah, well, I like to say that if you're going to engage in analyst relations, like, could you do it without an analyst relations professional? Absolutely. I mean, before Cognizant was doing it with their VP of marketing before I came into the picture. So absolutely. But with an analyst relations professional, whether that's someone full-time or part-time fractional, like my business model is, then you just get there faster because we've done it before. We know what we're doing. It's kind of like anything, any kind of thing that you're doing. It's like even someone buying your business, like, you know what you're doing, you've done it before, and you can help that company get there faster than doing
Yeah.
it without you. Like, could they do it without you? Yeah, they could, but it would be difficult, more difficult.
Let's say let's just, if we leave out that you can actually buy people who know what they're doing, then if you're a company who wants to start this, getting on the radar of analyst firms and like building these relations, what is kind of what are the things that you need to do? Like, if no relations, who do you contact? What does the process look like once you've contacted them and so forth?
Well, one is I figure out who your analysts are. So like,
Okay.
Which analysts are talking to your prospects and how do you figure that out? One is like the easiest way, honestly, is to look at your competitors. Who are your competitors? Most companies have competitors, and are the analysts active in that space? And are they writing reports and including them for your competitors? So like, look at your competitor website. Do they have any like Magic Quadrants or Forrester Waves or IDC Marketscapes on their websites? And then that's number
Google,
one.
what would you like if you had like just said it had Google in front of you? How do you then what is it that you start typing in?
I would search for like whoever my competitor is, and then once I'm on their website, I'd look in the newsroom or the About Us or their marketing and see if they have anything that's related to an analyst firm. And then those are typically the ones I would start with.
Yeah.
And
okay, so that's step one. We find the analyst.
Okay, yeah. You find the analyst.
Do we do when?
Then you would do a little research about that analyst. So like, who is the analyst? What do they care about? What are they writing about? Follow them on LinkedIn. Maybe stalk them a little bit on LinkedIn. Sorry, analysts. Oh.
Yeah.
Don't contact them on LinkedIn. Like, do not send them a private message saying, "Can I brief you?" That is not the right protocol. And that's the number one way to get an analyst to not like you.
Okay.
That's what I've heard anyway. And here's the other thing. Everything I say, take with a grain of salt, because we're all individuals and we all like to do it differently. So I'm sure there's an analyst out there who's like, oh, Wendy, I totally want people to write into me and I'll take their briefing. But a lot of them are like, tell your startups not to do that. That is the number one thing they should not do.
Okay, so we don't reach out we don't do direct messaging. What do we do instead?
Yeah. So you want the analyst to know who you are. So you need to create a briefing. And there's resources out, like you can Google, and I'll get you a couple really good links that you could put in the pod notes for how to do a really good briefing. And read that. You'll learn how to do a briefing. You put together a briefing deck, 30 minutes talking about yourself. The blog will tell you everything you need to know, what you need to put in there. Then once you're ready, because I know how people work. People say like, oh, I'm just going to ask for a date and then I'll get ready. But like, get ready, practice it. Practice it with yourself, your friends, your mother. Make sure your mother can, if your mother's not in tech, make sure she understands what you're talking about. You want to make sure it's understandable. And then book your briefing. So you go on Gartner.com or Forrester.com, and at the bottom of you scroll all the way down, there's usually something like book a briefing or analyst relations. They change it around. So that's why I can't tell you exactly where it is. But then you book the briefing, you fill out the form. Like if it says like about your company, put some information in there, make it interesting, think about like, I'm selling myself to my most important prospect. What do I want them to remember about me? Yeah. That's how you want to think about it, and keep it
probably
simple.
Some of the companies that has raised
messages. Say that again.
I think probably some of the companies that have raised money from investors, there's probably some of the preparation you did for like presenting the vision of your company to investors that could probably be recycled, or at least I'm guessing, Wendy, that some of
it can be recycled. But it's better to start from you can recycle some of it, but there's some things that investors care about that analysts don't, and some things that analysts care about that investors don't. And that's one of my pod partners' number one pet peeves is like, don't deliver your funding doc to the analysts.
Got it. Okay, so you've booked the meeting and then you carried out the first presentation. Is there kind of a layer of people you need to get through, or what does that?
There is a layer of people. So there's there's the vendor briefing team, and they will schedule your briefing. So you submit your request. Within 48 hours, you'll get a email back with a link. Like ideally, the analyst has accepted your briefing. So that's why you want, like they can say like, oh, we're too busy. It's not the right time. I'm not interested. That doesn't cover, I don't cover that topic. Any of those excuses. And they're not excuses, they're real. And then, and ideally you get that email back. As a non-client, I've heard sometimes it can be hard to get that email back. So like you might have to send a couple of notes and you might have to like reach out, find somebody who knows the analyst to like reach out to them and try and get them to like take your call. It's like you want to make it interesting. You want the analyst to want to take your call. Like think about what's in it for them. They're going to hear about some hot new technology that's going to help their clients do XYZ and why you're different. And the differentiation is really key. So you have the briefing, and then the Gartner sales rep is going to try. If you're not a client, Gartner sales reps are amazing. They are really, really, really good at their job, which means they can be kind of annoying because they're constantly calling all your people, and but they're really good salespeople. Like if you're looking for
we have an A that comes from Gartner, and she's also really good.
See? Yeah, I bet. Oh yeah, I heard her on the pod the other day. She was great. Social selling tips. Those were good. Anyway, so your Gartner sales rep will start, trying to sell you. And I mean, there's lots of tips. Some of them I don't really want to share on the public forum.
No, of course. What about the timelines here? How long does a process take? Any kind of ballpark figures on that?
It depends. So like, it depends how quickly you can get your deck together and what's going on in the cycle. So like, for example, if you have a Magic Quadrant in your space, like there's like probably a month after the Magic Quadrant publishes might be the best time to brief the analyst. If you're not trying to get into it, because like as a small vendor, getting into it, you might want to wait a couple of years to get into it. You might want to like educate the analyst, make sure they understand who you are, work with them so that you end up like in the position you want to be in, as opposed to if you start working today, but your story isn't that strong, you might do a lot of work and not get in there because you might not qualify from a revenue perspective or a client perspective. But there's, so you have the briefing, and then you ideally start to engage with the analyst, whether that's like another briefing. You want to get them to like want to hear more from you. So, you want to have your briefing to be meaty enough that they get what they need, but like you want to leave them wanting more. Like this is the worst thing one of the worst things about analyst relations is you're never done, ever. So it's like, we get off the call and they're like, great. Like we've got 3 follow-up action items because they want to hear about our product roadmap and our customers and our ideal customer profile. And we've got to schedule 3 more briefings to cover those 3 things. I'm like, yes. And my executives are like, we have more work to do. I'm like, yep.
Yeah.
I guess one of the number one things to remember is that it's a long play. It's not a short play. Like you're building relationships. These things take a long time.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Or
but
at
I
least
love
you
it.
can buy your service, then make it a little
No,
bit
it's still
easier
fun.
to,
I love
um,
it.
if I think just in terms of this, like if I'm a vendor that wants to do this, how do you then construct the business case for deciding now we want to go on this path? Kind of what is it that you kind of, when is the timing right? When, how much, there's kind of, we need to spend some time, but it also costs some money. Is it the right timing for us now? Kind of how do you arrive at, I'm guessing, like, how do you arrive at that conclusion on now this is the path we
Yeah.
need to go to?
I I like to look at both the learn and the earn side together. So if that's the case,
Maybe
then you
just
want to,
repeat the what learn and earn
yeah,
is,
sure.
Wendy, so people
Earn is
remember it. Yeah.
brand building. So like getting customers, ensuring that more customers know what your brand is. And
Yeah.
the learn side is learning about the market, working with analysts to help them help you about the market, reviewing your messaging, reviewing your website, those kinds
Yeah.
of activities. So I like to look at them together because I think, especially for a small startup, or even a big startup, that is where you get the most value.
Yeah.
Otherwise, if you just go for the learn side, somebody eventually is going to be upset that you're not getting the earn side. So if you're working on both together, it works better. And for that, you need to have a couple, at least two, really, really great customer references that are within your ideal customer profile. So like a lot of times startups will have like a bunch of customers who just like, the sales rep went out and they just sold them something, but it's not what they really want to work in. Like I even look at my
Yeah.
business, like, I really want to do advisory, but I've got a bunch of clients who I do full service analyst relations for. So, I want customers that I do advisory to be my references to customers that I want. So
I think that's a
that's
really
the same kind of thing.
good definition, Wendy, that it's not before you really have your ideal customer profiles as your customers, you're not ready to start the analyst relations. I think that I at least can relate to, that we're starting to have those, but it's only been within the last maybe a year that we've had those.
And that's an okay time to start, like, because it's a long play. And like, I'm not
Yeah.
trying to sell you my services. That's not,
No,
that's
it's
not it.
fine.
But, like, like one of my clients, they, um, they're starting to get their ideal client profile,
Yeah.
and they started working with me probably they started thinking about it in like October, and they've been clients of Gartner and Forrester for the last year or so.
Yeah.
So they bought contracts, they started using it a little bit.
Yeah.
Most of the startups I've had, they've bought one or either Forrester or Gartner. They start trying to use it. They realize how much time it is, and then they like come to
Yeah.
someone like me, and like I help them like get more ROI out of it.
Yeah.
Um,
Makes sense.
and um, like again, you could do it without us, but we help you faster. I mean, there's a lot of us out there.
I mean, it's also because it's it's still a very very niche skill, so
Yeah,
it is hard to start like from scratch on it. So for me, it makes sense that you would probably want guidance on it.
yeah.
So now we're running a little bit out of time now, Wendy, or at least closing to the end. Is there anything that you feel like we've not covered yet that we should cover in relation to these analyst relations and why to build them and how it works and so forth?
Sure. I think one of the things I want people to remember is it's not just about hiring an analyst relations professional.
Yeah.
If you think you're going to hire an analyst relations professional and they're going to make hay for you and you're just going to sit back and do your regular job, it's not going to work well. the analyst relations professional is like a concierge into the company for the analysts. They can help you, like they know the right restaurants, they know the right shows, they know how to reach, they know how to get you into that hot restaurant, but they're not the chef. You're the chef.
Yeah.
So, the people, you want the founders, you want the head of product, you want the head of strategy, depending on, there's lots of different titles, lots of different names, different companies have different kinds of roles, but you want multiple people to be engaged with your analyst, just like you want multiple people engaged with your clients. Like one of my CEOs used to say, I want 3 up and 3 across. I want to know a lot of different people at the organization, because if my client contact leaves and I only know one person there, then it's not going to renew. So it's the same kind of thing.
That makes sense.
That's the number one thing, I think, is that it's not just me or the person who, sits in my seat. It's got to be you too. And it's really fun. And you can get, like, most of my clients are amazed at the kinds of things that analysts can share with them. They think that they go in thinking like, oh, it's all about the magic quadrant. But then they start engaging with the analysts and they're like, wow, those analysts are really smart. And they're helping me think through these business problems that I have about my business and how to market myself. And what is my ideal customer profile? Or what should my messaging be? That sort of thing. And some of the questions are really tough. Like I'm often sitting, like I like to say, like I sit on top of everything and I see how everything works. And I often see the broken processes. So like, it's fun, but nobody, sometimes I'm the bearer of bad news, but I love it. It's fun.
Super good, Wendy. I want to thank you very much for taking the time to at least educate me on this topic. I think I have a lot better impression now of what it's all about, and I think I'll go straight to Google now to try to write magic quadrant and a few different keywords, and then try to find analysts without now writing them directly, but maybe just start following them and see what it is that they talk about within our industry.
Yeah, and use the social selling tips from the other pod as ideas of how to, work with the analysts too, because it's not just about your prospects. It's like, how do you build relationships with people online in general? And I'll send you the link to that. It's a great blog about a briefing, like what to do for a briefing. It's so good. I can't recommend it more.
Thank you. Let's say goodbye to the audience now, and thank you so much for your time.